Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of Broken Brains. I'm your host, Bruce Parkman, sponsored by the Mac Parkman Foundation. And today we have a very intriguing guest because we don't really talk a lot about the legal aspects of subconcussive trauma, repeated blast injury, and what it means for our children, for our adults, and for our athletes. And we're getting ready to talk to a warrior who's actually, walked the walk, talked the talk, and has taken the side of families and athletes that have suffered from playing contact sports, and we're excited to have her on here. Her name is Pamela Tahkur. Thakur's with Thakur Law Firm, and she's the founder and managing attorney with over 18 years of experience. And she maintains a diverse practice that includes complex litigation in the areas of employment, business law, family law, personal injury, and real estate, as well as transactional services, trust, and estate planning. Sounds like you do a little bit of everything. We're going to make sure that you give a complete pitch for yourself at the end of this show. She's been selected as a super lawyer rising star every year since 2016 and a super lawyer for litigation from 2020 to 2023. And she's a top-rated 10.0 lawyer on AVVO and is a certified lawyer of distinction. What's AVVO, Pam?
That is basically a legal platform for attorneys, as well as it allows interface with different attorneys all over the United States, and then it allows the attorneys to get reviews from clients and to actually communicate with clients as well. There's an interface that allows questions and answers. Essentially gives different individuals who are looking for attorneys, clients, potential clients, information, education, and allows them to connect with different attorneys all across the United States.
Well, obviously, with a rating like that, you get you've got a lot of satisfied clients, which is very hard to achieve in the lawyer space. My first question is, I've got a daughter who's a lawyer. She's a practicing attorney in Colorado Springs. And, she knew from the very, very start that for some reason she wanted to be an attorney. We had no idea where that came from. So how did you get into the legal profession? What was your incentivization, your motivation to join the league?
I think I'm a lot like your daughter, Bruce, because when I had just started high school, my parents are actually immigrants here in the United States. And I would get so upset when they could not handle the legal system in the sense they didn't understand it, and they would get taken advantage of. And so my parents, my mother's a business owner and my father is an engineer, and they would somehow just get into situations where they just were at the bad end of the stick. And I felt very frustrated that they couldn't understand how to navigate the legal system. So as soon as I started high school, I immediately joined the mock trial team. And that was in 1994. Believe it or not, back in 1994, when I joined the mock trial team, I actually applied to be a part of the mock trial team, and I didn't make it. And so I asked the coach, the teacher at the time, if they could give me another opportunity to see if I could make the mock trial team. And I did make it, and then I was an attorney on the team and had excelled on the mock trial team. And the same thing had happened to me when I went to UCLA. I wanted to join the mock trial team, and for whatever reason, I had to keep fighting for it. But ultimately, when I joined the team at UCLA and in law school in San Diego, University of San Diego, I ended up being the best oral advocate for the entire class that I graduated in. So there's being a woman of color. I think sometimes people look at us and they think, well, how can that person be, an amazing, attorney or litigator, even on a fake mock trial team? So I had to deal with that throughout my entire career, but I knew that I wanted to fight for justice. I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, and I wanted to have that forum to learn the legal system so I could help other people who couldn't understand it or who couldn't help themselves.
Now that brings, as a good point. In the legal profession, you can go the path and make a lot of money and really go, burn the hours up. And I've worked with a lot of lawyers being a businessman over the years, but there's a very compassionate side to the legal profession. And it seems like, folks like you that just, obviously you are an attorney, you represent the legal profession, but you want to help. And so, is that what got you into family law when you could have done so many other, IP protection or,
Yes.
patents and all that stuff?
Absolutely. In fact, I was at a firm for about 10 years, and I had actually successfully tried a jury trial, getting one of the largest, multi-million dollar verdicts for the firm, and I was up for making partner at that firm. And I decided to leave and start my own law firm because I wanted to take cases that other firms wouldn't take. I wanted to use my knowledge, my experience as an attorney to take on difficult cases where people could not get representation.
And is that what led you into, obviously, the audience doesn't know this yet, but you've had, some successes on litigating on behalf of plaintiffs who had suffered brain damage from, I don't know, I'll be honest, I know the sports side. So
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, how did you, go into this, and then how did you gain all the knowledge on the brain, right, to get in there and rip it up and plead the case of your folks?
Actually, it was a referral through one of my clients. Her brother was a former UCLA football player, and it was a very sad story of the abuse that this individual, who was the lead plaintiff that I had represented. I represented four former UCLA football players against the Regents and their former coaches and trainers for gross negligence that resulted in traumatic brain injuries that could have been avoided for at least two of these individuals. There was sort of a climate of essentially anyone who was injured to basically put them back out there and use them as punching bags. And that included numerous hits to the head that essentially ruined a couple of these players' lives. And they'll never be able to recover from that. When she brought in her brother, no other attorneys would look at these cases because they're so difficult, they're so expensive. No one sues the Regents. No one, it's football. It's a dangerous sport. You sign a waiver. Like, why would you do this? Why would you find a way to actually get around all of these, affirmative defenses that have been established in the legal system? The legal system is in a way potentially the only remedy, but at the same time, it's stacked against student athletes and anyone who's playing football. Quite frankly, it's very difficult to bring a claim to overcome a summary judgment motion or just what the standards are in tort law. So when the case came to me, I took it on as a challenge, and I didn't realize what an impact it would actually have to file these lawsuits. And the day after we filed these three cases, the media picked it up, and it was all over the New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times. I mean, we had no idea. We were absolutely not expecting it. But it's because these cases are so difficult to bring and try that was the impact that it would have for these universities on student health and safety and legislation. And the impact is still continuing forward. And so, that was the reason that I took those cases.
And when you talk about, the defenses like the waivers, I think it's something that, we talked about is those waivers. I mean, everybody knows football's dangerous. I knew when my son played, right? He's going to get he's going to, get a shoulder. Maybe he might break a leg or an ankle, but, I trusted the coaches and the sport. But nobody ever thinks about brain trauma and mental illness as an outcome of football. And of course, everybody's afraid that if that has become a well-known, outcome, then who's going to play football, right? When the fact is we can make football safer and make it an adult sport where people can enjoy. I mean, people have played football and survived. Many of you had long, healthy lives, but it's all about that exposure. So, how did you deal with those defenses when they say it's a dangerous sport? Because that danger, I've never seen I've looked at, the little helmet stickers and all that stuff. There's nothing in there about brain damage and mental illness, So, what were your, not your loopholes, but what were the gaps there that you were able to take advantage of to bring these cases on?
Yeah, and that was finding experts in the industry and being able to show that it wasn't just negligence, but it was gross negligence, and that the actions against these players, the type of drills, like certain variations of Oklahoma drills that are not actually industry standard that were taking place. The way that players who had concussions were treated, putting them back out on the field, using them as practice dummies,
What?
things of that nature. Yeah. I mean, it was horrible. We actually were able to get Norm Chow, who was the former offensive line coach, to provide a declaration as an expert witness saying that the standards were not being upheld to. And he interviewed a number of different players, and it's so tragic. We just represented just 4 players, but there were so many additional players who had suffered and, tried committing suicide, couldn't graduate from college, unable to work, completely destroyed in their lives. One of them, unfortunately, tried to commit suicide while the case was ongoing, and we had to get involved in helping the family with that. And also, after the case was over, the money is never going to be enough because you don't know what the long-term repercussions are for subconcussive concussions. So, it's not just the major concussions where you're in the hospital, but it's the minor ones that are most difficult to actually diagnose. But those are the ones that are actually the ones that are creating the most impact in terms of negatively affecting a lot of the student athletes. And so the way we got around that was using expert witnesses who were able to look at it and say, this is not even negligence. This is gross negligence, what's happening. And so that coaching staff, the folks that were involved, they were actually, they were terminated or they resigned. All of this information had come out afterwards. Quite frankly, it looks like in response to that, a lot of the concussion protocols have been tightened up. There's actually some legislation that's been proposed with the California State Assembly that is being looked at very seriously now for protecting the health and safety of student athletes.
And I think that's where I think you and I met. We testified on that California bill, and I was listening to you going, "Oh, I mean, you were angry. I mean, frustrated, because here we are. You've already dealt with these lawsuit cases, and here is a state, and I don't care what side of the political line you're on, who's I think was trying to do the right thing. I don't think they did the right thing banning football. I mean, it was just I think that might have been the step too far. But what do you think about that? Legislation, now that you've watched these lives be significantly impacted by nothing more. I always say that these kids, the only crime they committed was their passion for a sport. Their parents, like myself, were committed to my son being physically active, and we're not even just talking football here. It's just about the lifestyle and what we are allowing our kids to do. I do think that prevention till 14 is a good move. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think especially for young children, the later that the child can wait to until the child is actually having head-to-head combat, it's easier then as the child gets older to deal with concussions or subconcussive trauma, because the the way that the child's body develops, and this was a big issue that came out at the committee hearing, is that the heads of children are much larger when they're younger, and then as they get older, it's more balanced. And so it's for especially young children under 14. The science and the testimony from other individuals, consultants, physicians, parents, family members, I think was leading towards educating and informing the committee that it would be advisable to wait until the child is older. And I think 14 is a better age than, for children under 14. So I think flag football, versus head-to-head combat, I think that was a very positive review by the committee.
Yeah, we've actually converted our first police activity league from tackle to flag, and I'm hoping to template that and carry it across. Now, when you were in these legal battles, I mean, it's you read about how the big leagues or the colleges, they really throw everything at you. Like did they drag these courses out, these classes out? Where I mean, and another question is, we know, fans and parents are crazy, like they're nuts, and you threaten their livelihood. I mean, were you subject to abuse or any of that stuff? Or
no, because we're representing the football players. We support football. We're just advocating for more safety regulation. I mean, it wasn't about suing the regions, trying to it's not about that. It's about having better protocols and safety and health measures. Even within the university system. So it's just about protection of student athletes and their lives. I actually went to UCLA, so I'm a former Bruin. So I felt like I was advocating.
Born in two.
But I was advocating for other students, just like I was a student. So it wasn't, we're not suing the football industry. And if anyone thought that was the whole point, it wasn't. It was about, hey, this is happening. Something needs to change here. People's lives are being destroyed. What can be done to make this better for future generations? My children are my son is now in high school looking at colleges, and he plays sports. He's on the basketball team in high school.
Great sport, by the way.
And concussions are commonplace there too. So it's not that we want to prevent these, activities from taking place. No, it's how can we make it better? How can we prevent what happened in that one regime from not happening in the future? And if we don't do that, and there's no checks and balances, then this is going to happen again, and other lives are going to be impacted.
Make a good point too, is as a result of your lawsuit there, other colleges were kind of waking up to, we can't do this. And we do know that, like the Ivy League colleges, they don't have contact practices at all during the season, and neither does the NFL. And we really need to push those good standards down. But there's a limit. Right, and that's not happening. I mean, gosh, you look at high schools, right now, and I know my son, started in July, man. The season didn't go till, I don't think we started the season till September. It was 2 months of contact drills, and then they had contact every day during every practice, and so outside of the exposure and from 14 and under, just eliminating that. How could we, is there a way legally or I don't know to get these high schools? Like, I'm in a battle with my high schools. They still got a middle school football team, and we're getting ready to note them that is going to change. Otherwise, we have to go to court. And they've modified a little bit of that. But what can we, from the legal profession, the legal side, because it's all about standards of care. Yeah. It's all about, and then making sure that if there is a mistake, like you did, we acknowledge it and we pay for it. What can we do do you think, from the legal profession to go ahead and bring all of football and all of contact sports, whether it's rugby or hockey, to come up with a standard, even an age, because right, hockey's 13, I think, soccer's 12, which is still too young given the development that goes on during that age. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, is there any way to get all these, to recognize that high risk sports, is what we like to call them, are across the board, men and women, not healthy in certain quantities or at certain ages? How do we address that?
Right. So, I mean, unfortunately, the only way is to state legislation on a state by state basis. And that's why there are health and safety bills that are being proposed and argued and decided on enforcing, essentially like an audit process for student athletes. And also, the NCAA, they don't enforce the own rules that they have. So if you look at the rules that the NCAA has, they are meant to protect student athletes, but there's no enforcement mechanism. So without all of their rules and regulations, even if there was a way to implement some of their own standards in the universities, in the state universities, but then we're talking private universities. How do you enforce it in a private university? So is there a way for another third-party agency to get involved to make sure that those are being enforced? So the NCAA actually does have very clear rules and guidelines for different sports, including football, basketball. But in terms of enforcement, that's just not happening at the university level. So if there's a state, some type of state mechanism that could, that could enforce that. And I think, the bill that we were speaking at was really just for minors. There's nothing, there are some other bills that have been proposed, but they haven't actually, made it through the finish line. So there, and the reason that it hasn't is because the health and safety component was linked in with a financial component. And then, of course, the schools were lobbying and, different interest groups were lobbying and saying, no, you can't have a financial component. But now the NCAA, just if you're, pull it up, the huge class action lawsuit for billions of dollars, that is showing that there is now going to be a shift because there will be some type of pay structure for student athletes. So I think now is the time, because of the voices that are being heard and the nonprofit organizations that are pushing for more accountability. I think some of these bills are actually going to pass in the next few years. And I'm seeing a trend here that before everyone was saying, no, student athletes shouldn't get paid. They should just be used and, forgotten about. And now, because of these class action lawsuits, that's changing. So the settlement process is still going through. I don't know all the logistics of it. I'm reviewing it myself. But, I mean, this is really going to change the future for student athletes.
Would that, and I guess it's retroactive as well. So if that is the case and you have played contact sports, you never got paid for it. But if you are injured, say you played 4 years of college and, anybody can argue, well, you played high school before that. I mean, I really don't care. It sounds like, some of these folks, like you mentioned, whose lives are significantly impacted, who've had a lot of concussive trauma, might have a remedy to go forth, because our position is, I don't care who you are as an employer. As an employer, I'm a business owner, somebody gets hurt in a job, like I had guys in Afghanistan and Iraq that got shot, crashed in helicopters. I took care of them. When they got back to the States, I didn't say, hey, just thanks for going. Not even, you already served your country, going back and acting as a contractor. But no, we're going to take care of you. Send us your bills. We had insurance, and we made sure that all these folks got back on their feet. So it should be no different for, a professional league or a college to do the same thing.
Yeah, and that's the trend that's taking place right now. And there are now finally workers' compensation benefits in California now for student athletes that were not in place when, for the regime that I was representing in these lawsuits, which we did settle favorably for our clients.
Wow.
There's no amount of money in, that would compensate these individuals.
No, you've seen it, and I think we could both agree, or do you see that part of do you feel that these bills, part of the potential success for them passing is based on the emerging understanding of the impact of these sports careers on individuals' brains?
Yes, it is. And I think with your organization, putting education information available out there on social media with the conferences to the public, I think people are now understanding and learning so much more about the impact that this actually has, not just on individual lives, but for families and generations.
Absolutely. I spoke last week at a conference of 150 attorneys, nonprofits, judges, all sitting there. And when I started talking about sports and trauma, they didn't have a clue. I mean, they heard of CTE. I think maybe four people, when I said repeated head impacts, had raised their hands. We gave a lot of books away that day, but it also brought up there's a glaring gap of understanding and knowledge within not even just the legal community, but the court systems for
Yeah.
that these individuals show up as, you know, you know, they've been arrested, they're facing incarceration. So on the judges side, I've got a whole bunch of judges that we're educating now on, hey, how do you provide some leniency in addition with access to care to go ahead and fix these men and women, and then on the other side for the attorneys, they don't even know that this possibility of a defense or a legal argument exists. How do we fix that? I mean, do we? I know that in the medical psychological fields there is no training on repeated head impacts or repeated blast exposure. What can we do to educate the legal profession and our judges and the court system on this issue? I mean, you had to learn this all on your own.
I know. I think, putting education out there, putting this, on the forefront of people's minds, newspaper articles, fighting the good fight and just putting the information out there for the public to hear. I think that's really important and that's what you're doing. And I think, the brave plaintiffs that I represented, they did that. And that's what needs to be done. And there are a number of advocacy groups and nonprofits that are making this a priority to educate and to try to change legislation through information. So I think it's being done. It's happening.
Okay. Well, Ms. Thakur, how do people get a hold of you? All right. Obviously, you're an experienced professional in these aspects of law. Do you have a website, or is there they look up your law firm and
Yes, yes. It is www.thakurlawfirm.com, and they can certainly look us up online.
other lawyers or parents out there? You've watched the families, you've looked at you've watched them suffer. I mean, gosh, you've seen some tragedy. You have any recommendations for those as we close out?
Yeah, I mean, the recommendation is to really, carefully be involved with your children if they're student athletes and, be involved with the coaches, the training staff, talk to your student athletes and, find out what's going on and see and make sure that safety protocols are being followed and be involved in your children's lives. I think that's very critical. And the parents in these scenarios, and it really touched me. They unfortunately they couldn't recognize their children after the brain injuries. In terms of the children just completely becoming different people, becoming very aggressive or very reclusive, and completely the ability to continue studying or, socializing or trying to commit suicide. and the parents couldn't understand what happened because they were not either allowed to be involved, or they were not making an effort to understand what was happening, or educating themselves. So even if your child has a concussion, what is the best way to deal with it? And unfortunately, some experts say that the best way to deal with it is to avoid even having that head-to-head combat, but that's not always an option. When it's not an option, it's about being informed, educated, and being involved in your children's lives.
Ms. Thakur, it's people like you that are going to make that are going to help us, make the changes that we need as a society to look at how we play these contact sports, who gets to play them, when they get to play them, and how do we take care of those that have already been injured. And you have led the charge. I cannot, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a pleasure testifying with you that day.
Thank you.
Thank you for your energy that you're bringing to this issue, your commitment to this issue. And we'd love you to have you back on someday if you'd like to come back on.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right.